I have got something so fun for us today. We are going to start a plush from start to finish. Now, I think this is going to take a little longer than one video. It definitely will, but we're going to start it. So this is what I'm thinking. I have in front of me a little concept art that I have been drawing that I think will be so cute to use as a new plush. I want to sew a mom runner duck. And the reason it's a mom is because I think it would be so fun to put a little zipper pocket at the bottom and have some baby ducks that we could put inside. Do you guys remember those toys from when we were little or I was little? And they were so fun. It was always a surprise. You didn't know how many ducks. No, they didn't have ducks. You didn't know how many babies were going to be in the belly. And it was such a surprise. It was like the first surprise toy that you didn't know what you were getting. So you could get 3 to 5 babies. And I got a little puppy one and I got 3 babies. I was so disappointed. Probably most people got 3 puppies now that I'm thinking about it. But anyway, I loved that toy and I always thought it was so fun. So I thought it would be so cute to do that as a duck. And especially, I just love runner ducks and their fast little legs and their little body shape. I think they're so cute. So the only thing that I have done so far is draw my concept art of what I want this plush to look like. Together, today, we will work on our first draft of what this little plush is going to look like. So let's get started. This is my side view. I've got a little round head up here on top with a duck beak. And to get these pictures, I just looked online at what ducks looked like. I got some images and then kind of catered it to what I wanted it to look like. But runner ducks have really long necks. And then instead of the traditional body that comes out this way, they have bodies that come this way. Now, this is a design choice, but look at this wing. I drew it extra long because I think that if she was a tired mom, it would droop down next to her and they would just kind of be droopy. So that's kind of what I was thinking. I want them to be long enough that when they're sitting on the table, her wings kind of drape next to her. There's my first artwork. The next one is I drew a top view, so I had a good view of what I felt like the beak would look like. I was looking at pictures of ducks. Their beaks are almost their whole face. They're pretty wide and they're actually almost as long as their face. So that's kind of what I tried to draw here, that it's going to be wide, it's going to be kind of long, and this is the shape from the top. And then, of course, I had the shape from the side on this one. Then this is a front view of, again, the large beak. I kind of wanted to emphasize maybe a little bit of a cuter round head rather than the traditional. They don't have much of a head. It's more beak than head, but so I wanted a round head. Her extra long neck. This is kind of like almost a teardrop shape body. And then here is the wings that I was talking about. And here's what I was thinking for the legs. Let's get started. I'm excited about this. So we need to define terms a little bit to help us understand where we're going with this. Since I've drawn this, and I think this is the size that I want to make this plush, this is considered my silhouette. A silhouette is essentially just your flat piece, your 2D pattern, before you turn it into a 3D plush. So we're going to base everything we do off of this flat silhouette. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trace my silhouette onto my freezer paper so that I can adjust it the way that I need to make it into a 3D plush. Okay, so I just traced my silhouette. Now, we have to turn our silhouette into 3D shape, right? So kind of into a circle. So this is, if you're looking at a circle, this is the circumference, right? And this is the diameter. So this is essentially our silhouette. And this is what we want our 3D plush to be. So we have to turn our silhouette into a plush. And we have to decide how much we want to add. So depending on how big our silhouette versus our circumference is, that's the direction that we want to add. So if we're like looking top down at this, then to add a gusset, we would practically be right here, adding a width of fabric to this section, which widens these other two pieces. And then we still need to just add a little bit of length on this side to keep this current shape. So that's what we're going to do. If we look at our picture and we get our ruler out, if we make this 3 inches, and then we add this, it's 4 inches, a total of 7 inches, and then we add another 4 inches, we're at 11 inches, so our little duck would be about this big around. We have to add, so we're going to add another 1/2 inch on this side and make it 12 inches around. So that's about where we're at for this little guy. Do I want him to be bigger? If we have to put little guys in there, let's see what happens. It's always easier to get your pattern drawn and then we can scale it afterwards. I like to scale with the computer. So if we need to just make him bigger, or her, it's a girl, if we need to make her bigger afterwards, that's easy to do. We can do that. But let's keep our drawing going and keep the proportions that we have so that we are being true to our silhouette. Okay, so we're going to add 3 inches here, and then the gusset ends about here. So we're going to go this length down, and I want the gusset to end at the tail. So we're going to add 1/2 inch on this side. We're going to cut this piece off here, and we'll deal with the neck in a minute. So let's measure how long our gusset is. So our gusset is 9.5 inches long. And then at its widest point, it'll be 3 inches wide. So this is how I like to do gussets. We'll take a piece of our freezer paper and we fold it in half, making sure that it's at least wide enough for our initial 3.5. So at our widest point, if it's folded in half, we need 1.5 inches. We'll add plus 1.5 inches right here. And then we need to just we'll mark it right there. We just pivot around, just like we had done earlier with the measuring tape. Here's the start of our gusset. Okay, so let's use our pencil, and we need to measure 1.5 inches at our widest point. And we're gonna do a really easy gusset of, so we're gonna get narrow, start narrow here, get wide here, and then narrow again at the tail. Okay, so there's our gusset. Now let's add our 1/2 inch on this side. Okay, I just added our 1/2 inch. I hope I can explain this correctly. So in order to keep the shape of our silhouette, we added a 1/2 inch on there to compensate for the curve that we're going to get when we make it 3D. And that's what we're doing. We're changing our silhouette shape into a 3D plush. In order to keep the shape of the silhouette, this line that we just created has to be the same length as this line. And because we have these curves going in there, it isn't the same length anymore. This line is going to be shorter than this line, and this line over here is going to be shorter than this line, and potentially this line could be a little bit longer than this line. But this curve is shallow enough that that one might not be a big deal. So let's measure our line and let's see how much we need to adjust our silhouette to create our pattern. Okay, so we're sitting at 6 7/8. This one is This one is 6 3/4. So we ultimately need to remove 1/2 inch and 1/8 inch. So let's cut it out and I'll show you how we do that. I've got our beginnings of our pattern cut out. We need to add length to this line in order to make it the same length as this line, which will keep our silhouette shape the same. That's the goal here. Let me show you how you do that. We need to add length in this section and in this section. So I'm going to cut my pattern right there at that initial curve and leave it just a tiny flap at the end. See the tiny flap at the end? Let's go even deeper. Okay, there's one. It's still attached because we don't really want to mess with this line, but we are adjusting this line over here. So we're going to do it again over here, right here. And we're going to add into each one of these a 1/4 and a 1/16, right? Because if it's a 1/2 and an 1/8, which is, I guess, 5/8, it's 5/8. We got to add 1/2 of 5/8 to each of them. You get a piece of freezer paper. We're going to put it right here on top, and I'm going to measure a 1/4 and 1/16, which is 1/2 of 5/8. Okay, so we got to add that to that side, and then we're going to do it again on the other side. I almost lost it. Woo. I'm going to go iron this on, and I'll show you that little trick. So let's go iron this. Okay, so I just ironed them. This is where we're at so far. I added a 1/4 of an inch and an 1/8 right here and right here. And now the freezer paper is ironed on there. So all I have to do is cut off the excess. This is currently what our pattern is to help us get our shape of our silhouette. And I may want to go down to a 1/4 inch down here at the narrowest part. We'll see how that goes. If we put it on our silhouette, it's changed just a little bit to compensate for what we're going to do to it. So this is no longer our silhouette, but our pattern piece that we're going to work off. Okay, we've made it this far. We've done the body. I'm going to cut this out. We're going to find some fun fabric. Okay, I haven't told you guys, but I recently inherited a whole sewing room worth of things. I now have more sewing supplies than I have ever had before in my life. And I've given a lot of it away, especially the fabric, but I kept some of it because I think it's fun and I think it's perfect for making drafts of things. I'm never going to have to buy fabric again, probably. I should rephrase that. I'm never going to have to buy fabric again. I definitely will buy fabric again based on what I want, but all of this fabric is perfect for making drafts. So I have boxes and boxes of this stuff. So this time we're going to go through this one, and I don't know. I like to pick multiple colors, so I need to pick out 2 this time so that you guys can see the difference in each pattern piece and what we are doing. I don't want it to ever be confusing, like that you can't see the seams or the lines where things are. So we're gonna get exciting. We're gonna pick 2 different fabrics. Like this one is speaking to me today, which it's really cute. We're gonna use it for drafting. And then look, this will be so fun for the gusset. So let's do those 2 fabrics, and we'll just keep working our way through all of my fabric that I have now. Okay, I've cut out my fabric. I only cut one of these. I need 2 of them. Okay, try again. I cut out 2 pieces of this fabric, and actually I have 2 the same direction. Whoops, but it will go great. It'll be fine. One thing that I want to talk to you guys about is the importance of seam allowance. I do not like wasting my time on making a perfect 1/4 inch around seam allowance when I am drafting. It just is a waste of my time. So, but it is important in making sure that we sew these accurately, because if we're quick in sewing them, then how do we know something's wrong with our pattern instead of just us making a quick sewing problem if we just mess up in our sewing and have lazy sewing? So it really is important when you're sewing these drafts to be accurate in making sure that you're actually sewing on your sewing line. And if you miss your sewing line, having a mark on there so that you know that it's not quite on its sewing line. So what I like to do is not rely on my seam allowance for my drafts, and instead I draw directly on there with a marker so that I know where my sewing line is, and then I can be more accurate without taking the time to worry about seam allowances at this point in the drafting process. So I'm going to trace around my lines, but I will say that on the final pattern, seam allowances are perfect and so helpful to guide us without having to do this part of it, and helps us actually become much more accurate in our final product. Also, clip your seams. Scissors for everything. These are my tiny scissors. I love clipping seams with them because they're so strong at the end. These I did not inherit. These I bought. They're worth every penny. So let's flip it over. What a beautiful bird already. Okay, here's our body. I think he looks great already. We're gonna stuff him and make sure we like everything. Got my basket of stuffing right here. I'm really feeling good about this little shape. Definitely is not big enough to put little babies in there. Oh, proportions. This is a good example right here of poor sewing. Like, see here, I've got a little divot here. Can you see that? Like trying to make a dinosaur or something, which shows that I just didn't sew it very well there. So that's not a pattern problem that I need to fix. I also have a few like little Sharpie lines right here. So I was really close to sewing the lines, but I know it's not quite exactly what I was planning for the pattern, but I did pretty good on the rest of it. But this is like the only spot that I would say, ooh, do I need to fix that? Or I think that's just an error in my sewing. So how are we feeling about this little guy? Okay, one thing that I'm gonna do is round this off so it looks like the tail is going up rather than that square edge. I don't like that square edge. It won't take much to just round that. But as far as like converting our shape, it's almost exactly what we wanted. Let's keep going. I think this is a good start. I already like her. I think she's cute. Okay, so we're moving on to our neck. Our silhouette is the diameter of our circle. We need to know based on the diameter what the circumference of our circle is. So if we measure our silhouette, it is 1¼ inch wide. So now all we have to do is ask our phone to do our math for us. What is the circumference of a circle? That's diameter is 1.25 inches.
The circumference of a circle with a diameter of 1.25 inches is approximately 3.93 inches.
3.93 inches. When we added our ½ inch to the back of our pattern, it actually is exactly 2 inches, which is half of 4. So in order for our neck to be the same circumference as the diameter of our silhouette, we just need to add the extra ½ inch that we already added to the back of the pattern. So easy peasy, we can do that. Okay, so that's our actual pattern for our duck based on our silhouette. Let's cut it out. Okay, here is our current pattern for our duck. I've got 2 of them. I'm going to mark it. Currently, this is just a straight line, so if this works, then we could just make that into one piece and sew it, but we might need to alter it a little bit. Okay, I added the neck. I actually just unstitched this one a little bit. I've still got some stuffing in the tail. I just added it right to this draft since it really was not that big of a change. Here we go. It's coming together. Let's stuff it again. Woohoo! Stuffing! Yay. Oh, woohoo. Okay, my kids just got home from school, so I'll continue this tomorrow.